I will say this, Russell did not help himself with his Flintstones thing at the end of the race.
You know what that is? Simply lovely. I tell you that.
Stay tuned for that and more on this episode of Overtake Mode's Recharge.
On the brakes, Leclerc has that inside line. Perez goes off the track, cuts the chicane. Off goes Leclerc, through goes Hamilton. Unbelievable.
This is Recharge, Overtake Mode's mini pod recap, where we talk about what our model got right, what it got wrong, and what to look for at the next Grand Prix and for the rest of the F1 season. Welcome to this week's episode of Overtake Mode. We're going to go ahead and jump right in today with our usual format. Takeaways from the Austrian Grand Prix, how the model did, and what we're looking forward to at Silverstone, which is just around the corner. So Nate, I'm going to throw it immediately over to you. What were your takeaways from the Austrian Grand Prix?
I hate to say this, but my first takeaway is that Cadillac suck.
'Cause it's no good.
I mean, they really are struggling, and that's saying something when Aston Martin is also in the field. How many laps? About 15?
I think it may have only been 5. I mean, maybe if you add their laps together, but
That's what I'm saying. Their reliability shouldn't be that bad now. I do know that was a weird track for brakes or whatever. So that was my first one. Poor Cadillac. I think as usual, the world is too quick to jump on a narrative. And Russell's back in it. I think Hamilton's still in it. You know, Antonelli is now getting the quote unquote bad luck, which I think was you knew was going to happen. And I think it's just going to be a title fight. I don't know who's going to win it, but when Verstappen looks good, Hamilton's in third, Russell's not that far away. I continue to be bothered by Verstappen complaining about Hamilton. Not a single person complained about Verstappen trying to get a penalty for Hamilton. On some of the other like Red Flags podcasts, they're like, Russell's such a whiny little bit, but they never say that about Verstappen. It's not because I think that Verstappen's wrong, it's because I don't think Russell's doing anything wrong. Sainz does it, Hamilton does it, everybody does that because that's something that they just part of the racecraft in our world. They're talking to the stewards. Hey, just take a look at this. And Russell is called out on it. Verstappen is not. I rest my case. There you go. I will say this, Russell did not help himself with his Flintstones thing at the end of the race. Let's stop that. But once again, people are making fun of him. What the hell is simply lovely?
I'm flat. I'm beyond frustration.
You know what that is? Simply lovely. I tell you that.
yeah, so I'm going to agree and disagree with you at the same time there because I still find Russell annoying, but pointing out certain penalties, that doesn't necessarily bother me as much. It's that when it's just a result of hard racing that I get a little prickly. And so I've always been annoyed with Verstappen for this reason. And although my position on Verstappen has softened over the years a little bit because I do think he is an incredibly good driver. I used to kind of question that just because if you lived through 2021 and you were on Team Hamilton, which I was for that season, Verstappen got incredibly irritating, in part because he would make these incredibly risky moves and expect to get away with all of them. And then when something didn't go well, it was never his fault. It was always the other driver, the team. And that was the Verstappen that kind of receded a little bit more into the background once Red Bull had the dominant car. So when I saw that, I was like, yep, that's the Verstappen that irritates me. And that's the thing. I mean, for me, one of the takeaways is it's a reminder that one of the reasons why Verstappen's performance is what it is partly because there are only a handful of drivers that I think know how to challenge him effectively on the racetrack. And here, brace yourself, Nate. I'm actually going to say something nice about your guy. I think George is one of them, but I think George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, Oscar Piastri, pretty much those three drivers, I think. I feel like there might be a fourth that I'm forgetting, but who know how to race him hard. And that's why you've seen these collisions, right? Like even Norris, who I think is an excellent driver, has pointed out ad nauseum by a lot of people. And even as a Norris fan, I would concede Norris isn't willing to take the kinds of risks that he should take with Verstappen, because Verstappen is kind of a bully on track. And that's what Hamilton said. And Hamilton's response when he learned about the complaint was perfect. He was like, look, you shouldn't expect to pass a world champion on the outside when you're not leading into the apex. Like, I wouldn't expect to pull that off with Max, and Max should have known I was never going to let him get away with that. To me, it's the equivalent of the soccer player who doesn't even get hit in an exchange and then is rolling around and screaming. My other takeaway, though, was the track, actually. I think that was interesting, and this will, I think, set you up for your model, because I think, in some sense, just to kind of give a little teaser, I think your model may have done better than some of the engineers did when it came to anticipating the challenges of the track, and that is because, I mean, Austria is always a challenging track every year, even when the regulations have gotten more solidified over a period of time because of the altitude difference. But when you throw unprecedented heat into the equation, it becomes even that much more volatile, because these cars are expected to work within a window, right? To be optimal at as many tracks as possible and not just good at a track. Some of what we witnessed had to do with those track conditions. I think underperformance by McLaren, underperformance by Ferrari in both those categories, and Cadillac, catastrophic, as you already pointed out, consequences to their inability to have their car in any way, shape, or form ready for this track.
So once again, did they underperform, or did they just screw up like they always do with strategy calls? I mean, Leclerc is going through a bad time, but Piastri had a really good weekend. Like, he was on point. And then the Hamilton finished behind Mercedes and Max Verstappen. I don't know. I think that Ferrari's fine, other than they're always screwing crap up.
I mean, to your point, whether it's the engineering or the strategy, I do think one pattern that I have seen in the years I've been watching F1 is that when things get a little bit iffy, you see the legacy teams that know how to win world championships in recent years often step up. And usually that's Mercedes and Red Bull, like that they are able to adapt and take advantage of those conditions. And even McLaren, they've won 2 world championships, but I still think they're getting into the groove of being a more steadily competitive team, especially with the switch in regulations. They kind of flounder. Ferrari has that legacy, but in recent years, by which I mean decade plus, they trip over themselves. And so you see those two teams still being very competitive, of course, top 4, but making some miscalculations, whether it's strategy or the setup of the car, that you don't often see in the same way with Mercedes or Red Bull. I want to talk about to me, the big headline for our podcast this week, which is, I think you should share. How did the model do this weekend, Nate?
This weekend, the model did pretty well pre-race. 3.82 average position error. You and I have some plans to update the model, maybe with some power unit, team race stuff, that kind of thing. But we did all right. We predicted Hamilton, Norris, Antonelli on the podium, and it's not bad. But post qualification. Now, you did some work where you looked up the bookmakers or whatever. Our post qualification prediction model got an average of 1.27 positions off, which is amazing. I had 7 drivers exactly right. 6 drivers off by 1. No driver was off by more than 3. And I think if Perez and Bottas hadn't had their brakes explode, I would have done even better, because that's where most of the 3s and 2s were. And so, yeah, that's I'm feeling pretty good about that one, John. And I think you said without the DNS, it was like under 1. How did the bookmakers do?
Pre-qualifying, they were 2.09, which means that, and this is a pattern we have seen as we've gone back and looked, is that the pre-qualifying predictions that we're running do tend to not beat the bookmakers, but the post-qualifying do. And I should hasten to say that we have not been diligently gathering the data on the bookmakers' updated odds, which they, of course, do update the odds after qualifying, just like we update our model. But with Austria, I actually was able to take a look at that, because this information is unarchived, I think, for fairly obvious reasons. I don't think bookmakers want those kinds of things to linger for any longer than they need to, just to collect all their money from people who are gambling. The prediction model there If I can just take a look. We beat them on that as well. I do have this graphic. I'm just calling it up here. So the bookmakers were off by 1.82. So they also improved, but marginally. And we were, of course, at 1.27. So we beat them, that sounds like a small difference, but it's kind of a big deal, I think, when you consider that we are doing this and, you're largely working on this model on your own, with the exception of me occasionally making some annoying suggestions from time to time. But, the bookmakers have been at this for a long time. They do it across multiple sports. I think the open question always will remain with this first year is how much is the prediction before the weekend begins? How much of it is it off because of the reliability issues? And do things smooth out more next year once the regulations settle in a bit? I think with the bookmakers, one thing that I think the model has an advantage over them. I mean, for example, their sense of where Verstappen was going to finish was way off. Now, we may not have had Verstappen finishing second, but you didn't see the kind of fall in performance for Verstappen that the bookmakers predicted. So when something like that happens, like a shut-in qualifying, the bookmakers' odds tend to overreact a little bit, whereas I think your model, if I understand correctly, has all of this data about Verstappen's driving performance at Austria in particular, but across the season and previous seasons. So I think that tends to minimize the impact of a one-off shunt.
That is correct. I mean, you're exactly right on everything. The one disadvantage that our model has, John, is that we can't react to illness, upgrades, things like that. A bookmaker can. So whether or not we'll be able to work that in, I don't know. But ours is historical data driven. So eventually upgrades will get in there. But for like that specific race, no, we don't have a thing like upgrade. And I don't know if we want that, John, because upgrades sometimes don't work. I'm proud, John, of the model that you and I have put together.
Well, I just wanted to give one quick shout out to a listener, let's call him Edward, who recommended that we start tracking our model's performance against the bookmakers. We have cooked up some of these internally. I don't feel yet like I want to circulate them on the Substack just because, for example, we only have the pre-race, pre-qualifying bookmaker data. And so we're not always comparing like with like, and you can run estimates, but then I still feel it's too squishy. I think it's fair to say that in general, we know that the post-qualifying predictions that you're producing, each race weekend are performing quite well, and that they're outperforming the bookmakers usually. And so that's a sign that something with the model is working. I'm really excited to kind of to think about ways we can tweak the model. And obviously, as you were saying, there are going to be things we just can't incorporate, or that even if we could incorporate, might actually just make it less accurate.
Our post-quali model is far simpler than our pre-race, as it should be, right? But, we're probably not going to do a whole lot of tweaking there. But yeah, and thank you, Edward. Are you ready for next week?
What are you looking forward to in Silverstone?
I am looking forward to a continued Ferrari renaissance, but I'm also looking for McLaren to inch up. We have Hamilton, Antonelli, Russell on the podium, with Hamilton the most likely winner in our model. Russell's second most likely, but Norris and Piastri are right out there, lost in all of the talk. And this is for you, buddy. This is for you. I think we underestimate how good the McLaren driver lineup is. Is it the best currently in F1? I would put them up against any pairing, because it's clear the McLaren car is not that good. Their driving skill shows. Yeah, Verstappen is lurking as always. Leclerc, poor Leclerc, he's fallen down. And then in the midfield, we're a little bit bullish on the Williams. Maybe they get closer to the top 10. I don't buy it, but the model says what it's going to say. I think Isaac Hadjar will score points as well. How good is he doing for Red Bull's second driver? Yeah, that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, I'm really happy about Hadjar's performance, to be honest, because I like him as a driver. I mean, he does get a little feisty, but I think everyone in that seat, second Red Bull seat, it brings out the temper in them. We've saw it time and again. I was really worried they were going to chew Hadjar out, because I do think that he's potentially one of the best drivers of his generation, along with Kimi Antonelli. And so the last thing I wanted to see was his career be crushed by the Red Bull machine as the second driver. And so far, it seems to be going quite well. And I think he was pretty happy at the end of the weekend with his performance. I think he was frustrated during quali and some other moments, but in terms of where he actually wound up finishing, ahead of Lando Norris, for example, and Leclerc. He has nothing to be ashamed about when it comes to how he's doing in that car. So I'm excited and looking forward just to Silverstone in general. And yeah, I think it's a track where Hamilton does well, Norris does well, Verstappen's been pretty consistent there. The Mercedes, I'm sure, will do well. So it should be, fingers crossed, a really exciting race and weekend, because it's a race where several teams and several drivers are quite competitive and quite adept at this track. So we'll see how it goes. All right. Well, on that note, we will wrap up and we'll see how things shake out. But we will post, as usual, our full slate of predictions on Thursday. We did get the podcast out a little bit later this week. We may or may not be watching a lot of World Cup games while we're doing this, so that has interfered with our recording schedule. I can't promise that won't also disrupt when we get out the next pod after Silverstone. So thanks for joining us.